Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Akwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into Ezekiel, the 27th chapter. And in this chapter, similar to the chapter before in the 26th chapter, where the Lord was having Ezekiel pretty much pronounce judgment against the city of Tyre or Tyre. In this chapter, the Lord is basically, once again, by the mouth of Ezekiel, basically speaking of a lamentation. And there's a lot of symbolic, references in here, in the sense of likening, Tyre into like this merchant city, and then also into like a ship that's just like, built with the best parts from all over different areas, just to basically emphasize the glory and the high state that this city was in. Okay, and how much it's going to be, how devastating it's going to be, not only for them, but also for all the neighboring islands and regions that traded with them and depended upon them when they finally get brought down and not to return to their former state anymore. Okay, now keep in mind that though some of these chapters, like I mentioned, mainly the 26th and 27th chapters, remember that prior, I believe in the 25th chapter or so, the Lord told Ezekiel to prophesy against the neighboring nations, starting with, Ammon and Moab and Edom, and also the Philistines, right, concerning their mocking and their hand in us going into captivity. But also, Tyrus was also one of the neighboring nations. So hence the Lord is pronouncing judgment against them as well. Now, of course, the judgment didn't all come in one instant. Okay, these were things that would take place over a period of time. So you read about, what happened to them, the siege that Nebuchadnezzar brought upon them in verse 26. In verse 27, you read about, the lamentation for them. But really, chapter 27, Salakia. But really, when you get to the 28th chapter, as we'll get into in the next lesson, that's more symbolic. Okay, but we'll get into that in the next lesson. So this is Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 1. Lament over Tyre. The word of the Lord Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Now, thou son of man, take up a lamentation for Tyrus, and say unto Tyrus, O thou that art situate in the entry of the sea, which art a merchant of the people, for many isles, meaning islands, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, O Tyrus, thou hast said, I am of perfect beauty. So basically, when you look at, like we went into in the last lesson, where Tyrus is located, you had they have like the old Tyrus and the new Tyrus, but pretty much you had, I forget which one it was, the old or the new, but a portion of it was actually like an island in the water in the Mediterranean, about maybe half a mile or so away from the mainland. And, when Nebuchadnezzar had to besiege them, he had to build this causeway, basically like a bridge to get to them, which later was replicated when Alexander the Greek came and did that. And of course, Alexander's bridge that he built remained, which eventually is what turned this island into a peninsula. Okay, but the point is that, as it says here, thou art that art situate at the entry of the sea, which art a merchant of the people for many isles. So it was a merchant city, all right, a very major trading port. And in fact, these Phoenicians, right, as they were called by the Greeks, were actually the ones that went and set up like different colonies and so on and so forth, because they were a seafaring people. So places like Carthage, for example, which went against Rome, that was set up by them. Okay, so they were known as a major trading port. It says here, and so as it says, so meaning that they became rich. They were like a very wealthy in terms of the economy. They had the good trees and wood of Lebanon. They also had the good and rare dye, okay, that purple dye that was used to make clothes, that were very expensive. Hence, they were associated with royalty. So they had a lot of good resources, surrounded by water. And in addition to that, they had a lot of resources coming in from these different regions that will come to trade. All right. So you can think of maybe an example if you are somewhere in like Saudi Arabia, and maybe there's something that the Greeks have, for example. Somebody from Saudi Arabia, right? Though they would travel and stuff, it would be harder for you to try and make it. Let me actually pull up a map here of the Near East. For you to try and make it all the way to Greece, just so you can get, some resources. All right, that may be specific to just them. Okay, so here's a decent enough image, right? So you could have Saudi Arabia should be somewhere around down here. Let me just confirm that. See, Saudi Arabia map. Okay, actually over here. So close, right? So this big region here. But imagine the Greeks being like on this side, right? And you're trying to get resources. For you to have to actually travel all the way through here, maybe cross through here or here or here, just to get there to trade, that would be harder. But to have like a little, trading post area over here, okay, was more convenient. Because nations, even Tarshish, which was so far west, they would come here. Nations, as we're going to keep reading in this chapter, it describes the different nations and what they brought and how they came and traded over there. Okay, so sometimes it's not necessarily just that they would come and trade with Tyre or Tyrus, but you would have different regions, different people coming here, because they could then from here get access to materials and resources from many other regions, right? So they were in a very good position. All right. It says here, thou hast said, I am of perfect beauty. Thy borders are in the midst of the seas. Thy builders have perfected thy beauty. They have made all thy ship boards. So in the first couple of verses, it then starts to compare them onto like this beautiful ship that is just put together with all the best parts. Okay. But it's all in all, it's just metaphorical talk to emphasize the rich estate that they were in. But that's why it's called a lamentation, because that was all going to go. That was all going to be brought down. Thus saith the Lord. So it says, they have made all thy shipboards of fair trees of Senir. They have taken cedars from Lebanon to make masts for thee. And when you look into the word mast, these are parts of a ship, right? I forget exactly which part this is, but when you look into the flagpole, okay, as it says here, the pole or the flagpole. So they like it says here, they got the cedars from Lebanon, which they were known for that, right, to make masts for thee. Of the oaks of Bashan have they made thine oars, and the company of the Asherites have made thy benches of ivory, brought out of the isles of Chittim, or Kittim, which when you look this up, the blue letter tells you that not Asherites as in necessarily the people of Asher, okay, but more so a kind of tree or wood or material, okay. So when you look here, it says Ashar, okay, but when you look at it, it says here, perhaps boxwood, a kind of wood, edited by BLB, an error was made giving the definition as one from the tribe of Asher. So they're basically saying here that this isn't, they made an error as though it was one from the tribe of Asher, but it's really referring to a type of wood. All in all, it's the point here that's being made is the materials in this metaphorical example of Tyrus were of the best sort. It says, fine linen with broidered work from Egypt was that which thou spreadest forth to be thy sail. Blue and purple from the isles of Elisha was that which covered thee. Elisha being one of the sons of Japheth, I believe, or a descendant of him. It says the inhabitants, and when it mentions these areas, it's talking about the regions. The inhabitants of Zidon and Arvad were thy mariners. Thy wise men, O Tyrus, that were in thee were thy pilots. And the mariners and the pilots are pretty much like the sailors, the one that would, sail your ship and so on. The ancients of Gebal and the wise men thereof were in thee thy calkers. And when you look up like a calker, it tells you, let's see, calker. I love the Google definitions, by the way. Check this out. A calker is one who calks, especially one whose occupation is the caulking of ships. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. I guess this is let's see. All right, so it says here, what is caulkers, or however you say that? Workmen skilled in stopping the seams of the deck or sides of vessels. The inhabitants of Gebal were employed in such work on Tyrian vessels. So that's like what we're reading here as well. It says here, all the ships of the sea with their mariners were in thee to occupy thy merchandise. Once again, because that was like a very rich and famous trading city. They of Persia and of Lud and of Put were in thine army. Thy men of war, they hanged the shield and helmet in thee, they set forth thy comeliness. The men of Arvad with thine army were upon thy walls round about, and the Gammadims were in thy towers. They hanged their shields upon thy walls round about, they have made thy beauty perfect. So maybe if you look up something like defensed city. Okay, let's maybe look up a fortress in the ancient world. Trying to see if I can get a good image of it, but pretty much it's like sort of going into like the description of like this defense city, right? You would have the people that would be on the towers, and then sometimes for some of them you would actually have like shields and stuff round about at the top. I'm just trying to find a good image of it, but some of them have it, some of them don't. Yeah, not really finding any here, but that's all right. So anyway, continuing, it says here, verse 12, Tarshish was thy merchant by reason of the multitude of all kind of riches. With silver, iron, tin, and lead, they traded in thy fairs. So Tarshish being Spain, they would come over here and they would also trade, with whoever was there. Okay, I got this, I got that, I got this. Oh, okay, you got this. Oh, that's good. Let me take some of that back. So and that's why these were merchantmen, because the merchants would come to this area with whatever they had. They would trade. They would get new, materials and resources, and then they would take it back to wherever they came from, and then they would sell it, and they would make a lot of money. Because if you're selling like Arabian sandalwood, or like some silk from some faraway country in your region where they're literally never gonna get access to it from you, lest they go over to this faraway country, and you didn't have to go to that faraway country. You just went to this trading port. So if you come back with these materials, of course people are gonna, wow, where's that from? Oh, this is from from China or Moab land or whatever, and they're gonna say how much, and you're gonna tell them the price, and you're gonna tell them you're not gonna find this anywhere else. I'm the only one who got this here. So they're gonna make a lot of money. All right. It says here, Javan, Tubal, and this, what did this mean? This meant that for these merchants, this region of Tyrus was very, very valuable, because you would come here to get good resources. You have certain things from your land that you have in abundance. You take it over there, you trade it to people that need it just as much as you need what they have, and then you bring back those rare goods and you sell it and make a lot of money. So that's going to be a good, important avenue for you, right? And what is that doing? That's going to make that actual trading city rich. So it says here, Javan, Tubal, and Meshach, they were thy merchants. They traded the persons of men, slaves, and vessels of brass in thy market. So you basically gave them a trading platform. It's like this, right? Let me see. Imagine like a platform like Amazon, for example, where you can go and maybe you're like this business or this corporation, this company, you have these good products and you're trying to get them out there so people can buy them. You know, a lot of people go on Amazon. So if you can get your products on Amazon, there's a high chance that your products can sell. You can have more and more people get access to it and buy it. Okay, so Amazon will be very important for you. You know, if you're trying to get your product sold. Especially if like Amazon is like in this example, right? Amazon is like international, worldwide. People gonna come on there and the things that you selling, oh wow, what's this? Let me get that. You know? So that's why you had, like it says, Javan, Tubal, Meshach. Now these were sons of Japheth or descendants of Japheth, but it's referring to like the different regions. Okay, because in the ancient world, like as we know, all these places, they were really called after the names of their, like, you know, inhabitants or inhabitants. The land of Canaan, okay, the land of Israel, you know, the land of Aram, the land of Egypt, which was really Matazarium, you know, and so on and so forth. And then over a period of time, the names got changed. All right, but it says here, they were thy merchants. They traded the persons of men and vessels of brass in thy market. They of the house of Togarmah traded in thy fairs with horses and horsemen and mules. So the ones, this is basically what they had. This is what they brought. So you know, if you were looking for X, Y, and Z, you know who would have it. The men of Dedan were thy merchants. Many isles were the merchandise of thine hand. They brought thee for a present horns of ivory and ebony. Syria was thy merchant by reason of the multitude of the wares of thy making. Right? So the wares, the goods that you would have one of the regions that basically would come there to buy and sell was also Syria because of all the goods that you had. They occupied in thy fairs, meaning they traded with the goods you had, right? With emeralds, purple, and broidered work, and fine linen, and coral, and agate. Judah and the land of Israel, they were thy merchants. They traded in thy market with wheat, in thy market wheat of Minnith and Panag and honey and oil and balm. And a lot of these places are like places that maybe were known for, like, you know, having some good resources. Damascus was thy merchant in the multitude of the wares of thy making. And really, when you even read in the book of Kings and so on and so forth, we did have trade with them, you know, like this guy, Hiram. Okay, Hiram, he you know, friend of David, helped him out, as well as Solomon. Okay, so it wasn't just these other nations. The point was that in that region, Tyrus was known for being that main merchant city. So verse 18, it says, Damascus was thy merchant in the multitude of the wares of thy making, for the multitude of all thy riches, in the wine of Helbon and white wool. Dan also and Javan, going to and fro, occupied in thy fairs. Bright iron, cassia, and calamus were in thy market. So they came with their resources, and now guess what? Now in this trade city, you had access to all of these different things. You can go to Tyrus, you can have access to all these different resources here, coming from all different parts of the world. Similar to like a World Trade Center. So it says here, Dedan was thy merchant in precious clothes for chariots. Arabia and all the princes of Kedar, they occupied with thee in lambs and rams and goats. In these were they thy merchants. Okay, so when they came over there, and you're looking for them lambs and rams and goats, you know where to find them. So like almost like a giant marketplace. The merchants of Sheba and Ramah, they were thy merchants. They occupied in thy fairs with chief of all spices, and with all precious stones and gold. Haran and Caneh and Eden, the merchants of Sheba, Ashur and Kilmad were thy merchants. These were thy merchants in all sorts of things, in blue clothes, embroidered work, and in chests of rich apparel, bound with cords, and made of cedar among thy merchandise. The ships of Tarshish did sing of thee in thy market, and thou was replenished, and made very glorious in the midst of the seas. So they were basically known. They were pretty much renowned. They were like, when it came to trading, they were the ones. You know, they were good on the sea. They had a lot of good resources. They were well known. So they were very good. But the Lord said, guess what? Thy rowers have brought thee into great waters. The east wind hath broken thee in the midst of the seas, which is just another way of saying that basically now judgment has come upon you, right? So your rowers are those that are, you know, row your boat, right? Those are pretty much like moving the ship. You know, when you have to manually, you know, row, you got the wind pushing you too much. But it says they brought you into great waters, and the east wind has broken thee in the midst of the seas. So now is where the judgment is coming upon you. Thy riches and thy fares, thy merchandise, thy mariners, and thy pilots, thy caulkers, and all the occupiers of thy merchandise, and all thy men of war that are in thee, and in all thy company, which is in the midst of thee, shall fall into the midst of the seas in the day of thy ruin. So you're pretty much going to lose all of that. All those great ships that you had that were built with the best materials, you know, all those top-notch mariners and pilots and caulkers and merchant, all of that is all going to be gone. The suburbs shall shake at the sound of the cry of thy pilots, and all that handle the oar, the mariners, and all the pilots of the sea shall come down from their ships. They shall stand upon the land, and shall cause their voice to be heard against thee. Meaning they're gonna make a cry, they're gonna lament for you. Right? And shall cry bitterly, and shall cast up dust upon their heads. They shall wallow themselves in the ashes. So they're gonna mourn, they're gonna lament. Why are they gonna do that? I just explained the importance. If you, right, let's say you were like this established, going back to the example, this hypothetical Amazon example, you were like this established corporation. You were known. You were like a top dog. Whenever people came on Amazon, they got your products. And all of a sudden, Amazon crashes. They can't fix it. So some way, some reason, the site is just not working anymore. Boom, it's done. How much business would you lose? Overnight, your whole joint would be gone just like that, because as much as you are making revenue, you also have to expense certain things. You got to pay for certain things the bigger you get. So when your main source of income goes away, you still got to pay these expenses, and you start losing profit, and eventually you start going bankrupt, and you're going to be stressed out, because that's your cash cow. That's your main avenue of making those funds. So the same way, these merchants and these all these different islands and all that were depending upon this region, yeah, of course they were going to mourn and lament. Right? Similar to how when America goes down, as it tells you in Revelation 18, that you're going to have the nations, you know, the other nations saying, alas, alas, for how is that great city going down? Why are they going to be mad? They're going to be mad not necessarily because America is this great producer that makes these things and sends them out, but because America is a great consumer that buys their products. So verse 31, it says, and they shall make themselves utterly bald for thee, and shall gird them with sackcloth, and they shall weep for thee with bitterness of heart and bitter wailing. And in their wailing they shall take up a lamentation for thee, and lament over thee, saying, what city is like Tyrus, like the destroyed in the midst of the sea? When thy wares went forth out of the seas, thou filledst with many people, and thou didst enrich the kings of the earth with the multitude of thy riches and of thy merchandise. Yeah, of all the different regions, all the different nations that came there, they were made rich because you gave them an avenue. And now, when the Lord brings you down, that's it. They got to find somewhere else. It says, in the time when thou shalt be broken by the seas in the depth of the waters, thy merchandise and all thy company in the midst of thee shall fall. And all the inhabitants of the isles shall be astonished at thee, and their kings shall be sore afraid. They shall be troubled in their countenance. Why? Because they're going to be losing money. They're going to be losing business. The merchants among the people shall hiss at thee. Thou shalt be a terror and never shall be any more. So basically, they're never going to come back to that estate that we just read about, of them, being that top dog, that super rich, people. Because the Lord, over a period of time, is going to bring them down. And that's why it talks about like the seas, the waters coming up and, basically breaking down that, it's not literal, but it represents that over time, the Lord is going to bring them down and they were going to lose that estate that they were in. All right. And that's pretty much it for the book of Ezekiel, the 27th chapter. So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.